have about 1 cup of all-purpose flour in this bowl, and I'm going to add another half cup right now. The general rule of thumb when making a tortilla dough is you want about 1/4 cup of flour per tortilla, to which I'm going to add some salt. Mighty fork. Just incorporate it a little bit. Now this is the part that I have no measurements for because it's different depending on humidity, etc. But you add milk. Alright, estimating wise, I added maybe 1/3 to 1/2 cup of milk just now. This is really something you just have to do by feel and by experience. The cool thing though is that if you add too much milk, you can always just add more flour. So once it gets to the point where it's clumping on your fork like this and your fork doesn't really do a good job at stirring anymore, get in there with your hands. I like to have a little flour on standby. Looks like I'm not going to need to add any more milk, so I'm going to go ahead and put that back in the fridge. Definitely still pretty sticky. It's sticking to my fingers, so I'm going to add a little flour. And notice how I'm doing all of my mixing with just this one hand. This hand is perfectly clean, so I can still do things like open and close the fridge, get the flour, move the camera as I'm filming. You want to get your dough to where it is no longer coming off and sticking to your hand. See, now I can hold it in my clean hand and I'm okay. But you also don't want it to be super, super dry and tough. You still want it to have a lot of squeezable give to it. So once it's reached that point, walk away. 10 minutes later, your dough has relaxed a little bit and now it's going to be easier to roll out into little tortillas. I have a large wooden cutting board ready. Underneath it I have a couple hot pads just to keep it from sliding around. I've also prepped all of my fillings for my quesadilla. This is another one of those things you just have to kind of do by feel. I break off a little ball, about this big, of dough. That's going to represent 1 tortilla. And then I break off another ball. The rest of this I'm going to stick in a plastic bag back in the fridge for later use. And you take your ball and press it into your flour. You don't want to have to add too much flour to these because the more flour you add, the tougher they're going to be. But again, you also don't want them to stick all over the place. Now the technique here is you want to use even pressure. Tendency is often to press down really hard, and what that usually does is it makes the center of your tortilla, or indeed pie crust or whatever round thing you're trying to roll out, makes the center very thin and then the outsides very thick. You want to keep rotating the way in which you're rolling and flipping and redistributing the flour on your board just to make sure that it's as round as it can possibly be and it's as even as it can possibly be. And you'll notice that it also, it'll shrink back as you're rolling it, but you just have to keep encouraging it to go out. If it's shrinking back too much, that usually means it just needs to rest some more. And if you get it to a half rolled out state like this and walk away for a few minutes and come back, it's really easy to roll out. I have here my large nonstick skillet. It's on a burner on high, and you have to wait for it to get hot first. There is no oil in this pan. That's really important. And it's also really important to make sure it gets hot first. If you put the tortillas in before it gets hot, your tortillas are mostly just going to dry out before they cook. You want to blast them at high heat and then flip them pretty quickly. Dust the flour off before you put it in the pan. You don't want flour getting in there and burning. It'll happen anyway, but minimize that. Make sure you have a rubber spatula on hand to flip it. It needs to be flipped 30 seconds maybe. I usually don't time it, but you look at it. As you maybe saw from that shot, there's steam rising from this tortilla. Now the steam has stopped, which is an indicator that a lot of that moisture is gone now. And I can see, this won't be picked up on the camera, but I can see faint little white dots in this tortilla. That's actually the spots where it's getting brown on the other side. What you can do is you can flip it slightly and peek, and I can see that those dots are bubbling. You want to get a little bit of browning before you call it done.